Check Podcasts.
Hey everyone, welcome to Political Capital, your source for all the latest in BC politics. Thank you so much for being here, listening and watching. You can get our old episodes on Check Plus or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're here on Check TV, stick around because This is Van Color with Mo Amir is coming up next on the station. We are going to bring in the Pod Squad. They're here each and every week to break down the latest in BC politics, it's a crazy time right now. We got so much going on. Premier is on his way out. New Premier might be coming in. We're going to get into that this week and also take a look at the upcoming Council of the Federation meeting on healthcare. Jillian Oliver is here, a green strategist extraordinaire. Jillian, thank you for being here each and every week.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
And Jeff Ferrier, Vice President of Hill and Knowlton, who worked in the current BC NDP government in the Ministry of Health. Jeff, thank you for being here.
Howdy.
Jeff, you're coming to us from the Yukon, so I appreciate you dialing in all the way from up there.
Oh, hey, my pleasure. And a big shout out to the BC Fire Service folks who are up here helping with the forest fires. We drove in on the Alaska Highway, and there was crews out there fighting some wildfires. So good on those folks.
Yeah, we'll probably talk about that a lot in the summer, too. Inevitably, we end up in wildfire season. But we got to start this week with the big news, which was obviously a surprise, I think, to most people. Ravi Kahlon, the jobs minister, announcing that he is not going to proceed in a leadership bid. He's out before the race begins, and he's throwing his support to David Eby, the attorney general. Basically, one front runner throwing his support to the other front runner. What do we make of this? What does it mean, Jeff? Why don't we start with you? This seems like a big deal. How do we explain it?
Well, it's stunning. You have two main combatants in a party leadership race, and before the leadership date is set or anyone has announced a leadership bid, the one has endorsed the other. So it's a great big deal. The conventional wisdom and what I've been hearing in the NDP in the months leading up to Premier Horgan's announcement was very much this is going to be David Eby versus Ravi Kahlon. I think Ravi would have been a formidable opponent. He would have been a formidable premier and a formidable campaigner. He's got a great story, great life story, former Olympian, has done a great job in government, starting out in a junior role, proving his chops and moving into a really important role post-COVID. And I think for him, the decision was just intensely personal. I think it was very much about I know every politician says it's about my family, but I think with Ravi, this decision was very much about him being a dad and a husband and family and, the time in his life. And in that respect, it was similar to, David Eby when he didn't run with John Horgan, young kids and all that. So I think what this means, though, for the race is that the race hasn't started, and I think we know who's won already. I think we know who the next premier is going to be. It's going to be David Eby. I think there'll be a race. I think there'll be a campaign, and we can talk about that more. But I cannot foresee a situation where anyone other than David Eby becomes the next leader of the BC NDP and the next premier of British Columbia.
And Jeff, is that because we take David Eby, who's kind of more on the activist side, perhaps, of the NDP coalition? He's got this huge public profile as Attorney General, money laundering, ICBC, all that stuff. And we combine him with Ravi Kahlon's kind of more traditional New Democratic supporters, his organizing base, he was a longstanding volunteer and strategist for the party. And you put those two together and you just become unstoppable? Is that essentially what you're saying?
Well, my read on the situation is that I think that the criticism of David Eby as being too close to the activist base that some are putting out is, I think that would have been true of him in David Eby 2008. I think it's David Eby 2022. He's been a cabinet minister for 7 years. He's taken on a lot of tough files. He's had to deal with a lot of serious issues, housing, insurance, big money in politics, all sorts of legal issues. We saw the settlement with Purdue over the opioid crisis. And I think he's evolved, he's grown and evolved, and he's much better able now to connect with everyday people than he was, I think, earlier on. He's much better at approaching politics in kind of the way that Ravi, you're talking about the traditional NDP way of, people first, communicating about impacts on people and communities rather than what's the perfect policy and are we getting it right. And in that respect, I think he's grown and he appeals to both sides. And I think Ravi endorsing him says that he thinks that too. And so the end result will be that, we're seeing in Ottawa on the federal conservative race, all kinds of friction and fraction. They're sending in election cops. And, in the NDP here, they have, Ravi was sending out Twitter hugs to David Eby. So it sets them up well for post leadership to be able to get to work governing quickly and effectively without recrimination and divisiveness. So it's a big deal. It's a great big deal.
Twitter hugs, the least worst thing you can get on Twitter. So that's good. Jillian, were you surprised by this? And when you saw it, what did you think? Like, what does this instantly mean in your mind?
Yeah, I was surprised. I mean, I didn't hear anybody predict this. And I think it would have been one thing for Ravi Kahlon to decide that he wasn't going to run, but it's a whole other thing for him to right away say that he's supporting David Eby without Eby having even announced his own intention to run. I think that it shows, like Jeff said, that the people who see themselves as the future of the NDP caucus in the post-Horgan era are really focused on governing, and that they've been cabinet ministers for 5 years with a PO that has had its own vision and its own way of doing things, and they're anxious to sort of to get to work, basically. That's sort of what it said to me, and I think there's pros and cons to having sort of a coronation type leadership event, which is probably what we're seeing compared to having a more open leadership race. I think, when you have a coronation, sort of the conventional thinking is media, the public, maybe underestimate you. I don't think Eby has that problem as much because, of course, he famously ousted Christy Clark from her seat. He's kind of known as a fighter and a winner already. But at the same time, you don't give the membership the opportunity to sort of air grievances and to have sort of a reflection on where the party needs to go next, where perhaps it's fallen short and how it needs to adapt to sort of a changing political environment and a changing voter sentiment. So, doing this doesn't make those problems go away, although it does in the short term, it doesn't expose them in a messy leadership race, but it sort of, still kicks them kind of down the road for the future premier to have to deal with once he becomes a leader.
Jillian, and for viewers, and listeners, you ran Sonia Furstenau's leadership campaign. You know how leadership campaigns work, that double-edged sword of the benefit of new ideas, debate, revitalization, talking about big issues, getting new party memberships, raising money is kind of the positive side of a leadership debate race, a real race anyways. And then the negative side, Jeff touched on, you can have kind of acrimony, you can have people criticizing each other's records, cracks in kind of that armor. You can also have campaign irregularities. I can't think of a single leadership race in the last 20 years in BC for any party that didn't have concerns about memberships, voting structure, sign-ups, or kind of a little bit of a cloud over the end result. So when you put those two things together, Jillian, the benefits of a leadership race for a government and party versus the drawbacks, it seems like maybe they might get more benefits by going this route, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think it sort of depends on whether or not the future leader is going to be able to sort of, deal with the issues among the membership that people are sort of dissatisfied with, and if they can sort of avoid those folks, looking to throw their support elsewhere, or, to sit home and not, come be your organizers and those kinds of things during the next election campaign. And I think, there's a lot of issues that are going to be difficult to deal with, including under the Ministry of Attorney General, some issues around, prosecuting protesters up in Coastal GasLink that came out today, charges laid that are controversial, and you see, some sort of grievances being aired amongst the membership about those sorts of things, difficult issues to resolve on the government's environmental record. So I think it really, it's to be determined whether or not, instead of sort of, making big promises on how you're going to fix those things in a leadership race, if you can instead resolve them to your members and to your voters' satisfaction through governing.
Yeah, those are great points, Jeff. That pressure release valve the leadership race can allow for parts of the NDP coalition, especially on the environmental side, to vent about maybe not agreeing with everything government did and feel like their voices are heard. That might get lost in a coronation where the entire caucus and everyone's lined up against one person. How do you think they handle the points that Jillian was just making?
I think that a leadership is really important for that pressure valve, and I think there is, despite the fact that David Eby is the clear front runner and looks unbeatable, to me at least, that there will be a contest. There will be other candidates. Won't be Ravi, but I expect that there will be candidates in the next week or two who emerge, who will very much be focused on certain party members' concerns about the government's record, specifically around a lot of the issues that Jillian touched on around environment, around climate. And I know I was talking about Ravi Kahlon sending out Twitter hugs. This week you saw Bowen Ma sending out Twitter daggers to the party on the issues of LNG and Site C and a bunch of those climate emissions. So that doesn't happen by accident. She's really a savvy, smart, strategic politician, and for me, that read like a tilling the ground. I'm terrible at analogies, but getting ready to put the seeds into the ground, whatever that's called.
Sowing. We call it sowing.
Sowing. There you go. Sowing the seeds. This is why we're the pod squad and not just anyways. Sowing the seeds for a leadership race for someone. I don't think it's her.
So you think she might run?
No, I don't think she's going to run. I think someone else is going to run. But at this point, I'm not 100% sure who that person would be, and wouldn't want to put Mabel Elmore on the spotlight like that.
Okay. Jillian, what's the risk of David Eby, the perceived frontrunner and winner with the highest profile, having to run a leadership race against a couple outsiders and a couple backbenchers who have nothing to lose? And when you ran Sonia Furstenau's race for the Greens, everyone thought she was going to win. Like, it didn't seem like that was in question, but it feels like maybe if he doesn't win with the overwhelming, massive 99% support at the end of a race, that it might be a disappointment. Like, what are the risks in a guy running a race that everyone thinks he's going to win against other people by the end?
Well, lots. I mean, I think, one is that you can kind of, if you kind of let it go to your head that you're going to win, you kind of take your eye off the ball and you can get surprised. I don't think Eby doesn't strike me as the type of person that isn't going to take this seriously. It's been something he's been contemplating for a long time. But I think that's a risk. I think there's also a risk that, you end up making statements to appease the membership that might not sit well with, the general electorate in the next election, or that you might not be able to live up to. There's a risk, like I said before, of, a lot of division and splintering. There hasn't really been any internal reflection on the government's record on environmental issues. Party activists are upset that they haven't been able to debate LNG at convention. And then, of course, we had the snap election, where I think, for me, the biggest issue with the snap election is that we didn't get to have a conversation about, fossil fuel subsidies and LNG, and we didn't get to learn about the final cost of Site C until after the election, and all of these things that we haven't sort of add up to sort of pent up frustration if you're not able to sort of discuss them. So it's a line that he's going to if another challenger emerges, I think it's a line he's going to have to walk carefully, because I'm sure as he's learned being in government and undergoing that transformation that Jeff talked about, things are a lot harder once you get into the details, especially on these big issues. We're talking about stronger climate action. We're talking about a massive paradigm shift in the way that we do things in the province, and there's all kinds of consequences, which is why the actions have been muted to some. So yeah, lots of risk, but also I assume probably a pretty savvy campaign that will be thinking about how to navigate it as well.
Yeah. Well, if anything, David Eby seems pretty savvy about his political kind of strategies that he's used over his career. So I think you're right. You'll probably take that into account.
Can I just jump in and say I think Jillian's right that there needs to be a party reckoning with environmental record. I think there are many who feel that it's strong. George Heyman has done a good job with Clean BC, and it's got a lot of positive recognition. But at the end of the day, if there is a race, no matter who the candidates are, there will be a vote of party members on what's the right direction. And there will be a clear choice that folks can have, and they can pass judgment. And it can be the approach of the current government that has to get into those tough details and come up with a solution that will actually work, or is it a different direction? And so, while they may have been able to not have to deal with it at other conventions, they will have to deal with it in a leadership, and I think that that's a good thing.
Let's touch on the Council of the Federation. All the premiers, 13 provincial and territorial leaders coming to Victoria Monday and Tuesday. Premier John Horgan is the host. They want to discuss healthcare. They want to raise, they want to demand from Ottawa a raise to the Canada Health Transfer from 22% of the share of healthcare spending right now to 35%. It would be another $4 billion for BC, $28 billion more for Ottawa. Do we think that this is going to result in anything that would actually convince the Prime Minister to do this? It's an issue that has been, at the forefront of premiers now for a couple decades and hasn't produced any real results. Jillian, what do we expect from this? Anything or not?
Well, I mean, it's always hard to read the tea leaves on these types of things, but it certainly doesn't sound like the Premier, Horgan, thinks that there is going to be anything imminent coming from the feds. He sounded a bit frustrated with his comments this week on that issue, so I'm not expecting it, but, I think we learned this week, you can always be surprised. And I think, I would hope that the federal NDP hasn't given up trying to sort of pressure on the province's behalf as well as part of their CASA agreement, because I think this, is the biggest issue in pretty much every province in Canada right now, and something's got to give.
Yeah. Jeff, what do you think?
I think the thing that I'm going to watch for at this Council of Federation is the patient's voice. I think that there's been a lot of airtime given to the politicians and their various positions. I think we're reaching a stage, and you've seen this at other councils of federation where health has been an issue, where patient groups, people on the front lines who have been not getting the cancer treatment they may need during COVID, and want to see people who don't have family doctors coalescing and applying pressure on all politicians to stop just talking about numbers and start talking about, listen, folks, your job is to fix healthcare, get to work, get it done, stop with the back and forth. It's about us, not about you, and make it happen. So I think that we're going to start to see, I would be shocked if at this one there weren't a big push from all sorts of patient groups to be out there front and center to push the debate forward. And I think that will be the big development of this, and not anything between Ottawa and the provinces.
I was a little surprised. I asked the BC government this week, what would you do with $4 billion extra in the healthcare budget? What does that increase mean in terms of doctors or beds in hospitals or wait times or anything? Can you quantify it? And the answer was, not really. It's going to help the overall healthcare system. And I thought to be honest, that was a little bit of a lazy response by the BC government when your premier is the chair of the Federation tried to announce this. Come up with a case for the money. Come up with a tangible case that this is going to help X and Y and Z and make things X better and Y better. And instead it's like, give us the money. The request to Ottawa is give us more money. We will spend it how we want and don't put any strings on it. And also give it to us right now and into the future forever. And I kind of don't, I'm not sure if you're the federal government facing a potential recession, that's a very persuasive case other than the fact that the healthcare system is under stress and you might have to do it anyway. So I'm not expecting a lot out of this. I would hope maybe there's a better case coming from the premiers than just the system's in crisis, which we all know. Does the money fix the problem? Does $4 billion fix the problem for BC? No idea. I have no idea. I don't know what it does really, but it will help. But I was kind of a little bit surprised about that. So we will see. But we just have a minute or two left here, and I want to just do a quick hot take here on Craig James, the former BC legislature clerk, obviously charged with a number of offenses, found guilty of breach of trust in a court case recently for some expenses relating to clothing and suits. He was sentenced this week to 1 month of house arrest and 1 month of curfew. Jeff, what do you make of that?
Wow, once again, the Canadian judicial system lowering the boom on white-collar crime. This is incredible. The curfew from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. I thought there already was a curfew from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. in Victoria. Have you ever tried to get food after 9? This town is closed. But I guess we can all take comfort that all the clothing stores in Victoria close at around 6 o'clock, and so we don't have to worry about a profligate suit buying and inappropriate expense making.
Yeah, the tricorn hats and expensive suits are safe and locked behind bars and key. Jillian, what did you make of this?
I am happy for him that he's going to have some time to chop his wood at home in peace this summer.
Manually, with an axe.
By hand, yeah.
No machines allowed on that. The end of a really disturbing and dark era at the legislature, for sure. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Just a quick programming note as we go into summer, the TV version of Political Capital, the online YouTube version as well, the video version you see will be going on hiatus, but we will be back each and every week on your podcast stream. Use Google Podcasts, use Apple Podcasts, Stitcher. Find us there, subscribe, and on Fridays we'll be around to talk to you about all the latest in BC politics. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and we will be back next week on Political Capital.